Hello and welcome to episode 268 of my podcast all about knitting and crochet in my yarn shop here in Wiesbaden, Germany. I'm Kiko and today is March 16th, 2025. And today I'm wearing my Remember Cowl, which is a pattern by Nathan Taylor, the sockomatician. And this is my very first proper double knit project that I ever knit and finished. And it's this beautiful pattern where you have those poppies. I think that's what the flowers are called. And there are red flowers on a black background. And because in double knitting, you don't have any floats or anything, you can have as many or as few motifs in your knitting as you want. And the pattern actually has, I think, pearl stitches and also could be some nuts that there are in the middle of the flowers, but I wanted to use beads because I love beads. And this is one side of the project, and then on the other side you have the red background with the black flowers, and I used red beads for this side. And I really love this cowl a lot. I used Hansa Farms Alpaka silk yarn, which I think has 70% alpaca and 30% silk, which is a beautiful yarn, very nice to knit with and even nicer to wear. And I'm really happy with this cowl and love wearing it a lot. And I paired it today with this crochet pullover. This is a pullover I crocheted before I started working in the yarn shop that I used to work at, Vollerödels, but I got the pattern and the yarn from them. And I remember that there was a pattern for how to crochet one of these motifs. And then it said to crochet the next motif onto the first, but it didn't explain how to do that. So I remember I went to the yarn shop and asked them how to do that, and they didn't know either. So they couldn't tell me. So I kept thinking about how this might be possible until I figured it out. And back then, there weren't any YouTube videos yet, so there was no easy way to search for things on the internet. So you had to either find someone who told you, or you had to figure things out for yourself. And then once I figured it out, I went back to the yarn shop and I told them, and I said, in case somebody else asks, this is how it works. I don't know if they remembered or if they really understood what I was telling them, but I thought it was important to let them know. And then you start off with these motifs and you crochet them, you attach them to each other even while you knit the last round. That's what I'm trying to say. And then afterwards you crochet these motifs. So you have fairly big holes when you attach the squares, and to fill them in, you do this little motif. And that's, I think it's crocheted from the outside in, something like that. Not too sure. I just remember that there was about 1 million ends to weave in, because every motif was started again by itself, and then those little ones as well. But then the shape of the pullover is very simple. So it's straight lines. It's just squares attached to each other. And then if this seems wider, it's just because it sort of hangs like this. And also with the front and back, they seem a little fitted, but that's just by hanging down and looking a bit tighter here and hanging wider here. But basically it's just squares. And you could use any crochet square or even knitted square patterns and create a pullover like that. Yeah, so that's what I'm wearing today. And because the red color in the cowl and the red in the pullover aren't exactly the same, I am wearing the cowl so that there's only a few flowers showing. The other flowers are in the back where right now nobody sees them. And yeah, so that's that. Now on to finished objects and works in progress and so on. I have a whole lot of new projects today, and I also have a new haircut. And that's because I'm going on holiday tomorrow. And this is also why I'm recording today on a Sunday, but the video will be released tomorrow on Monday as usual. But it means that next week, Monday, there will be a special video where I show you some of my favorite winter pullovers and cardigans. And then the Monday after that, there will not be a video because I will still be on holiday. And then the week after that, I'll be back from my holidays, and then I'll show you everything that I knitted on during those 3 weeks that I won't be filming. So that's out of the way. And just to mention it here, it's probably not as interesting to you, but when there's an Opal Opal subscription parcel coming, I usually do an unboxing video to show the colors. I only do that on the German channel because I can't do it twice. Once I've done it, I know the colors. I can't be surprised again, so I never do it twice. You could watch those videos on the German channel if you were interested, but this time there won't be an unboxing video because the parcel arrives next week when I will be traveling. So no unboxing video this time. Yeah, I think that's everything I wanted to mention up front. Now on to finished objects. I have several tiny things as finished objects, and none of my proper projects got finished last week. Now, my first finished object that I want to show you is, I think I showed you this sock that I knit in preparation for the next tutorial video. This is for these helix stripes where you can knit 2 colors without having a beginning or end of round. You don't have to cross the yarns over or do any of those things, and I show how to do that. And then usually I knit the second sock in front of the camera, and I did that with half of this sock, and then I realized I'd forgotten to turn on one of the lights, so I put it to the side and I started the next sock, which I then knit in front of the camera. And because I didn't want to end up with 3 socks, I knitted number 4 just to be sure I had 2 pairs. So now I have 2 pairs of baby socks with helix stripes, and the main color is this middle blue, and the contrast color is a 100 Wasser colorway by Opal, which usually has quite a lot of colors because you don't really use a lot of yarn in those tiny socks. There's only a few different colors apart from light blue and light green that you can see. Yeah, so this is sort of my first finished object. It's not a finished project because I'm going to collect all 12 pairs of baby socks that I'm planning to knit this year in that one project, and then I'll call it a finished project. The other project is a new one and a finished one, and that's the March gnome that I knitted this month. Sarah Shearer, who's the queen of knitted gnomes, decided that this year was going to be another year of gnomes, and everybody who knits a gnome within a month can post it in her group, in her Ravelry group, and might win a prize. And but you can just take part for fun. And I knitted a gnome in January and one in February. In February I forgot to post it, but this month I wanted to be sure I knitted a gnome and posted it before I went on holiday, and there wasn't that much time, so I decided to knit a tiny little gnome. So this is Naomi from No Fun Like Gnome Fun, from the pattern No Fun Like Gnome Fun. I've knitted this pattern quite a few times. I think it was last year or the year before that I knit maybe 10 of them to give to each member of my family. And this all started with these thingies. I'm not quite sure what they're called, but I found them really cheap, and I thought it would be fun to attach a gnome here and then to be able to hang it on my bag or just something. And then they were lying around here, and one of my customers realized that this yarn that was also lying around actually has the same colors as this clasp or whatever it is. And so that's why I decided to knit the gnome out of this yarn. And I started with one color, then I cut the yarn off and wound off a little yarn so that I would get to a contrasting color. And then I thought, well, I do want this to stay here, so I can have all the gnomes of the year in one place. But I also really wanted to take one with me, and I had 3 of these. So I just decided to knit another gnome. So I took part of the yarn that I unwound in between those 2 colors and knit the hat. And then I used the other end of the ball of yarn to knit the body. So again, there's a color change. And I think the only color that I haven't really used yet is the yellow. So I will probably make a 3rd one because I still have one of those thingies. And maybe that one will have either a yellow hat or a yellow body. And the yarn I was using, I was already asked about the yarn on Ravelry. This is Opal sock yarn this was a special edition yarn or colorway that they sold to people who have the Opal subscription. And I ordered several of them, and I'm planning to knit a pullover for myself. And I knew that I could, I don't need 3 full balls of yarn. So I knew I could knit a few gnomes and still get away with knitting a pullover for myself. So these are the mini March gnomes, and I have already posted them, so I can't forget it. And then in April, there'll be a new mystery gnome. I already bought the pattern, so in April, I will take part in knitting the mystery gnome by Sarah Shearer. Yeah, so these are the finished objects. Then on to works in progress. And I have one project that you already know, and then there'll be several new ones, and then I'll switch between new and old projects. Last week I showed you that I started the Sock Madness Round 1 socks in these colors and then made a mistake in the length of the leg. So I put it aside and knitted a different pair. But I've now finished knitting the foot of this sock. I added one more. No, I had 8 when I put it aside, and it's now 10 pattern repeats. And my friend tried them on and it fits her. And then I started knitting the toe, but I couldn't finish it. Yeah, but now I know what the size should be exactly for these socks. All I have to do is finish this toe and then knit the second sock with the colors reversed, of course. But yeah, that will have to wait. But I wanted to show you that I started the toe. And then so I'm not going to take those socks with me on holiday because there's 2 balls of yarn hanging off of it, and I'm trying to pack lightly. So I wanted some smaller projects that I could take with me on holiday. And I was also thinking about what I could knit on the plane. And I know some people think that all the knitting needles will be taken away, but so far nobody has ever taken my knitting needles away. But I always make sure I don't bring metal needles. I always have either wood or plastic needles. This time I'll try something new. These are needles out of carbon. Is that what you say? I don't know what this is called in English. In German we say carbon, and I think, is it a metal? I don't know. It's very light. It's very sturdy, but it's not very stiff. So it's a bit flexible, and the tips are not very pointy. So they're almost like rounded off a little bit. So I think these are not dangerous. So I do hope that nobody at the airport will consider them dangerous, but I don't think they are dangerous. So I will use those needles to knit not only on the plane, but also when I'm in the car or on a bus or on a train, because I think I don't think that I could injure myself a lot with these needles. They are very fine. This is a 2.0 millimeter needle. And the project that I decided to knit, I'm going to knit out of this Hansa Farm Alpaka lace yarn. This is 400 meters for 50 grams. So I will take 150 gram ball, and I am going to knit wrist warmers, arm warmers that I have knit before. I didn't invent the pattern, but I used this pattern for wrist warmers first out of DK weight yarn, and I made a tutorial video. It's possible it's only out in German, but it's a really simple pattern. And but then I knit the same pattern with lace yarn, and instead of doing 3 pattern repeats per round, I'm doing 4 pattern repeats per round, which is why I really like using double pointed needles. So I can either use 3 or 4 needles to separate the pattern repeats. And so I knit 1 pair in blue-green for myself and 1 light pink pair that I gave away. And those I think I knit on a 2.5mm needle. But because this is such fine yarn, I wanted to try and knit it on a 2.0 needle. And also it's because I have these carbon needles in that size. And it looks to be big enough, so I've tried them on. So that this looks really fine. And they are going to be really light. So even when I knit with a 2.5mm needle, it took me less than 10 grams to knit one wrist warmer. And I'm going to do like 3 pattern repeats in height, which makes them about this long, not very long for that much knitting. But that's what I thought is a good project for the holidays. I have very little yarn, but a lot of knitting to do. So here you can see the beginning of this wavy pattern. And it's a bit unfortunate that the needles are black and I'm using a black yarn. So this is a project that I will only knit when I have very good light. But yeah, I've always wanted to have them, and I hope that these holidays I'll make them happen. So that's the first or the second new project, apart from the gnomes. The next new project is another test knit that I'm doing, but it's also a project that I think is something that I can very nicely knit on holiday, and that's a shawl or a stole that Deb Milstein designed. She's a designer who designed this funny bobble hat that I knit recently. And when she announced on Instagram that she was designing a stole that she was going to call Opal Stole because she was using Opal mini balls of yarn, and she was looking for testers, I signed up straight away because I said, if you design a stole out of my favorite yarn, I would really love to test knit that. And so the test knit has started, and what you need is 1 main color and then 26 either leftover bits of yarn or those 10-gram minis by Opal. So I'm going to use a mix of them. I'm going to use some leftover yarn like this, and then some mini balls. I think I'm going to take 6 of them with me on holiday. That should be enough, and then I can knit the other 22 when I'm back. And I decided, I was thinking about using a bright color as a main color, but I just couldn't make up my mind. Deb used orange, which looks fantastic, but then I went and decided to use black. So this is a second black project in a way. And the shawl starts with a fairly long border in black or in the main color with simple lace pattern. And then I started the first contrast color. So this is this leftover bit of yarn. And this is a different lace pattern, but it's fairly simple as well. So I think it should be really easy to knit this on the go without having to concentrate too much. You always cut off the yarn, so I only ever have 1 ball of yarn hanging off of the project, and I'm going to use the Stephen Stephen to weave in my ends, so I don't have to weave in a million ends when I finish knitting. And I really like the way this looks, and I'm really looking forward to this shawl. It's going to be fairly big, so it's supposed to be 75 centimeters wide once it's blocked, and probably somewhere around 1.80 meters, so almost 2 meters long. So it's probably going to be like a small blanket for myself, but I'm really enjoying knitting this. And yeah, and I think so the black yarn, the black rounds after the border, I think it's only 6 rows with the main color, so I can knit them when I have good light. And then there's 12 rows of the contrast color, and these are all lighter colors, so I'll be able to knit them anywhere. So that's the Opal Stole. It's probably will take some time for the pattern to be published because it's a fairly big project. She gave us quite a lot of time to knit it, but I'll let you know when the pattern will be available. Now to something that you already know. And this is, again, it's something like a leftover yarn project. It's my Advent calendar pullover. There I'm knitting with 20-gram minis most of the time. I did actually split some of the minis in half, so this is only 10 grams. This is 20 grams, this is 10 grams, this is 20 grams. And then these two colors were 20 grams. And here I just knit 10 rows. I just wanted a little bit more shoulder. So I think that was even less than 10 grams. And I have actually finished the front and the back. And there was enough yarn in this color or that color to finish the second front or back to be the same length as the first one. And then again, I used this color to knit those 10 rows to get the shoulder width. And it's funny that they look quite different here and here, even though it is the same color. Let's see what this side looks like. Yeah, so there's fewer colors here and more colors here, and it was the other way around on the other side. Yeah, so I have definitely knit more than half of the pullover now, and now I just have to repeat the same number of rows that I did on this side, but in different colors. I forgot to bring the color that's next on this side. Yeah, but really happy I got, I finished those two separate pieces, and now this is all one go again. And the next garment I continued knitting on is the vest, Friends vest by Tin Can Knits, that I am knitting out of this Opal Opal subscription yarn. And this is the color for the current pattern battle. So everybody taking part in the pattern battle has to knit the same color yarn, but a different pattern. So this is going to be the only Friends vest. And last week I showed you, I think I'd finished the back, or what I was still working on. I don't know. I finished the upper back, and then I picked up stitches from this side of the back, and I finished the first front down to the end of the armhole. So here on this side, you can see the increases that are happening to shape the armhole. And on this side, it's difficult to see because everything is rolling like crazy. But here are increases to shape this V-neck. And this marker shows where the increases were done. And now it's straight down. And the next step, so I cut off the yarn, there's no ball hanging off of it. The next step is going to be to pick up the stitches here and then knit down the left front. And then I can take all the stitches on one needle and knit down. And originally I had thought of putting in some white yarn as well, do a little bit of not really color work, but I was thinking of maybe doing garter stitch short rows with a pattern, something like that. But at the moment, I don't really feel very happy adding garter stitch at the bottom of this stockinette stitch vest. So my newest idea was to just knit the vest the way it is, and then maybe embroider something in white onto either one front or both, or the back or whatever. So that's a new idea that I'm having, and I will decide when I get there. But finished one front. And then I'm working on a new garment, one more garment, and that's another new cast on that I cast on so that I could knit on it during the holiday. And this is another special colorway that Opal once did and sold to the people who have the subscription. And this is a yarn which is a mix of wool, bamboo, and polyamide, nylon. So because of the bamboo content in this yarn, it's more of a summery yarn than the usual Opal sock yarn. And so I decided to knit a summer pullover or a short sleeve pullover, summer top, something like that. And back when I ordered that, there were two colorways available, and I bought this one for myself and I gave the other colorway to my sister, and we started knitting the same pullover. And the pattern that we're using is called Multitalent. Multitalent? I don't know if you say that in English, but it's one of her maximum freedom patterns where you don't have to use make a gauge swatch. You can use any yarn, any needle, whatever you like. And you just start with 6 stitches, and then you do a number of increases, and then you knit this back piece until this side measures, I think, a little less than your head circumference, something like that. And then when you get there, you can cast on stitches for the front, and then you do a top-down pullover. And the pattern itself has short sleeves, but she gives tips how to knit long sleeves. But I want to knit short sleeves. That is, I probably have to knit short sleeves because I only have 200 grams of yarn, and I don't think that'll be enough for a long sleeve pullover if I want the front and back to have any length at all. So that's the plan. So this is the yarn. This is the beginning of the pullover. I'm only going to take the one ball with me. So at most I can knit half a pullover, but that would be great if I get anywhere near that. And I'm really looking forward to knitting that. So if the lighting is not so good, I can use this. It's a fairly simple knit and it's light colors, so that should be nice. And then I brought my crochet blanket, and I still needed 2 granny squares to finish off my blanket, and I used this colorway that I had used before. I think this was also a subscription ball of yarn, but then later this colorway was repeated in one of the series and you could actually buy it. And I used that to crochet the last 2 squares that I needed. And now this is going to go into the Opal Stole shawl test knit that I'm doing. So I can use up almost everything. So these are the last 2 that I needed, but I have also started assembling the other squares that I already had. And I thought it might be interesting to see what it looks like if you add them in one go. So I'm not adding one square, cutting off the yarn, adding the next, but I'm trying to go in one go so I don't have to cut off the yarn. And the most important thing for me was to add the big square, because I wasn't quite sure whether I would manage to do that, but it is actually working out. So at first I crocheted onto this square and this square on the upper side, and while I crocheted those edges, I attached it to the blanket, and then I attached those squares. And then when I got over here, I crocheted round the square, and then I crocheted on this side of this square, and that's when I attached them again. And then I went round all these little squares, and then when I got here, I crocheted at the edge, on the edge of the big square. Then I attached those that are hanging off now. So I stopped here. So once I finish that size, I will go round this square. And then when I crochet on this edge, I will attach them, go up here, down there, up here. And then when I get to here, I can go all the way over here and then all the way up here. Then I can close this, and then I can add another square here. I had a plan how to do that. Let's see if it works out. And then once that is done, I think there's 2 or 3 more rows of squares that I can attach. But if it's only small squares, I know how to do it. It's not such a problem. And yeah, I'm definitely not taking this project with me on holiday as it's huge, but I'm really looking forward to finishing this blanket. Now that brings me to the knit-along socks. And the February knit-along was socks with yarn held double and seat stitch if you want it. So these are the fluffy, comfortable socks. And I finished knitting the heel of the second sock. So first I knit this bit with the stockinette stitch over half the stitches, and then I knit the heel, and now I can go and knit the foot. The stripes come out quite differently in both of the socks, so it's sort of one down, which I think is funny. And at some point I will hopefully finish those socks. And the knit along for March were the socks with the Estonian spiral pattern. It's a bit of a mouthful, this name, but it's a really nice pattern that's very easy to knit. And I got everything in a mess. I'm sorry. Okay, there we go. So I'm using another subscription colorway, and this is what I have knit so far. So last week I had already started the sock. I don't know how much I had knitted, and I told you that I started on 3mm needles, and this is, so at this point I'd knit 30 rounds, and I put the marker, I changed the needles, and I'm going to knit another 30 rounds on the 2.75mm needles, and then I'll just knit a very simple stockinette stitch foot. I will make sure to decrease the number of stitches before I start with the heel to be down to the normal 60 stitches that I like to use. And yeah, I think it looks really funny. The yellow color stripe is the right size stripe to give those little squares. These stripes are a bit too small. This was a bit too big, but that's okay. With a yarn that has so many colors in it, you never quite know how white the stripes are going to be. And I quite like the surprise to see how it comes out. And it should be really fun to see at which point in the colorway I'm going to finish the sock, to see how different the second sock is going to be. Yeah, so that's the other knit along, and that's it. That's everything that I knit and crocheted last week, and I hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.